Texas is an unpredictable state. You never know what the next day will bring, scorching sun or a furious hurricane. I, Andy Brighton, have lived here all my life and thought I should be used to the whims of the weather. But nothing could prepare me for what happened. That day started as usual. I was working on the construction of another house when I heard the siren. Tornado. Not uncommon in our parts, but this one turned out to be particularly powerful. A huge black funnel, sweeping away everything in its path, was moving straight towards our town. I rushed to my truck to take shelter, but then I remembered Margaret. My mother-in-law lived on the other side of town, alone. My heart began to race. God forbid something happened to her. Without thinking twice, I turned the car around and raced to her, praying to all the gods that I would make it in time. What I saw at the sight of her house shocked me. Instead of a neat two-story cottage, there was a heap of mangled debris, as if a giant had crumpled it like a piece of paper and thrown it to the ground. Was Margaret inside? "Margaret!" I shouted, jumping out of the car. "Margaret, are you here?" The answer was silence, only the wind whistling through the ruins. I began feverishly digging through the rubble, tearing my nails and feeling no pain. God, let her be alive! The thought of losing not only my mother-in-law but also a dear person gave me strength, and then I heard a faint moan. From under the wreckage a hand appeared, smeared with blood and dust. I grabbed it and pulled with all my might. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Margaret's face, pale, scratched, but alive. "Andy!" she whispered with parched lips. "You came!" I hugged her tightly, feeling tears of relief running down my cheeks. "My dear beloved Margaret was saved. Now everything will be fine. I will take care of her." The next few days turned into a chaotic whirlwind of events. Margaret got off with a fright and a couple of scratches, but her house was destroyed to the ground. It was urgent to decide where she would live and what to do next. "Move in with us for now," my wife Sandy suggested, hugging her mother. "There's enough room for everyone." But I saw Margaret wince at the idea. She had always been an independent woman, used to her own space and routine. Inconveniencing us, a young family, was clearly not part of her plans. "Thank you, dear, but I'd rather rent an apartment," she politely declined. And then it hit me. I'm a builder. Why don't I rebuild Margaret's house with my own hands? It would solve all the problems at once and save her from unnecessary expenses. "How about I rebuild your house from scratch?" I suggested, taking her hand. "I don't have any big projects right now, so I have the time. You know I'd move mountains for you." Margaret smiled, touched, and nodded. Tears glistened in her green eyes, whether from my words or from the prospect of seeing her home again. I, too, felt my heart ache. She had already lost her husband once, raised my wife alone. How much she had to go through. From that day on, my life started spinning with triple force. During the day, work and running around on business. In the evening, building Margaret's house. Sandy was busy with her journalism work until late, so my mother-in-law and I were left alone. I had noticed before what a beautiful woman she was, well-groomed, fit, with a figure that many young women would envy. But now that we were spending so much time together, I began to look at her differently. Margaret often came to the construction site with homemade food and hot coffee. While I worked, she would sit next to me and talk about something. About her life, about her late husband, about her difficult relationship with her daughter. I listened, nodded, laughed at her jokes, and I caught myself thinking that I was much more interested in her than in my own wife. Gradually, our conversations became more personal and frank. Margaret talked about her regrets and unfulfilled dreams. I shared my fears and hopes. We grew closer, and it couldn't help but affect our relationship. And then one evening, when the house was almost finished, something happened that turned my life upside down. It was a warm Texas evening, one of those when the air is filled with the scent of wildflowers and the chirping of cicadas. Margaret and I decided to celebrate the completion of the main work and had a small dinner right on the porch of her new house. The coziness was added by garlands hanging everywhere and the soft glow of candles. There was wine and some snacks on the table, but I barely touched the food. I was consumed by a strange excitement, as if I subconsciously felt that something important was about to happen. Margaret looked especially beautiful that evening. A light white dress flowed over her figure, golden curls framing her face. She was talking about something, but I wasn't listening. admiring the play of light on her cheekbones. And suddenly she fell silent and looked at me intently. Something flashed in her eyes that made my heart skip a beat. Could it be? No, it can't be. "Andy, I have to tell you something," she said quietly but firmly. "You've done so much for me. Not only did you rebuild my house, but you also supported me in a difficult moment. With you, I feel like a living, desirable woman again. I think I've fallen in love with you." I was thunderstruck. For a few moments I sat with my mouth open, unable to utter a word, and Margaret continued, not taking her burning gaze off me. "I understand this is crazy. You're my daughter's husband after all. But I can't hide my feelings anymore. I need you, Andy, as a man." With those words, she leaned over and kissed me, hotly, passionately, as if putting all the heat of her wounded soul into that kiss. I should have pushed her away, said it was wrong, but instead I responded to the kiss, pulling her fragile body to mine. God, what am I doing? Hormones and conscience were raging inside, tearing me apart. She's my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, but how sweet her kisses are, how intoxicating her touches. It was impossible to resist. That night we made love right there on the porch, under the scattering of Texas stars, passionately, uncontrollably, as if for the last time. I never thought that at 50, Margaret could be so hot and insatiable. All taboos were thrown aside, only intertwined bodies and eyes burning with desire mattered. Only in the morning, when the first rays of the sun touched our flushed faces, did the realization of reality begin to return to me. God, what have I done? Betrayed my wife, slept with her mother. This is no joke, not some affair on the side. This is a real crime against the family. After that crazy night, I tried my best to avoid Margaret. I left early in the morning and returned late in the evening. I ignored calls and messages. I tried not to think about what happened at all, as if it never happened. But how can you erase from your memory those delightful sensations, that boundless tenderness mixed with all-consuming passion? The body ached treacherously with desire, and the heart ached with longing and guilt. Margaret, on the contrary, was not going to give up. She called me 100 times a day, left ardent confessions mixed with plaintive pleas on the answering machine. She waited for me at home, at the office. She begged to talk, to explain. And I was going crazy. I was torn between my duty to my family and my irresistible attraction to this woman. Yes, she was a good 15 years older than me. Yes, she was my wife's mother. But does it matter when it comes to real feelings? More and more I caught myself thinking that my married life with Sandy was just a farce. Not real, not alive, devoid of the colors and emotions that Margaret gave me. But I had vowed to be faithful, to be an exemplary husband and son-in-law. And now, all of this is down the drain. One evening when I got home, I found Sandy in the kitchen. She looked worried and slightly guilty. She was fidgeting with some envelope in her hands. "Andy, we need to talk," she began, averting her eyes. "Lately, you haven't been yourself. You're always missing at work, avoiding me. You don't even communicate with Mom, and you've become such good friends during the construction. What's going on?" Everything inside me went cold. Could she have suspected something, or worse, found out? Swallowing hard, I tried to feign nonchalance. "What are you talking about, honey? Nothing's going on, just a lot of work piling up. You know how it is." But Sandy just shook her head. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Don't lie to me, Andy. I know everything. Here, take a look." And she threw that very envelope on the table. With trembling hands, I unfolded it and froze. They were photographs. Photographs of me and Margaret on that fateful night. Here we are kissing, here we are tearing off each other's clothes. Here I scoop her up in my arms and carry her into the house. It was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped on me. Thoughts scurried like frightened cockroaches. Who? How? Why? Could Margaret have decided to blackmail me, to expose our affair to the public, to shame me in front of my family? But why would she do that? The answer came before I could finish my thought. Sandy burst into sobs and ran out of the kitchen, slamming the door. And I was left standing there, crumpling the ill-fated pictures in my hands. That's it. It seems my family life has just collapsed like a house of cards, and I destroyed it myself. The following days turned into hell. Sandy refused to see me, locked herself in the bedroom, and cried around the clock. I paced around the house like a wounded animal, not knowing what to do. I called Margaret, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. It seemed she had achieved her goal. She had destroyed my family, and now she had decided to step back. What an irony! But to be honest, I was not so much angry with her as with myself. After all, it was I, and only I, who was to blame for everything. I gave in to temptation, betrayed my principles and the people closest to me. And now I'm paying for it in full. After a week of this nightmare, Sandy finally came out of the bedroom, pale, haggard, with eyes red from tears. We sat in the kitchen, not looking at each other. An oppressive silence hung in the air. "So, you slept with my mother," she finally said in a lifeless voice. "Slept with her while I toiled at work so that our family would want for nothing. Tell me, have you two been doing this for a long time?" "Sandy, I swear it was just the one time," I pleaded, trying to take her hand. But she pulled it away as if from fire. "I didn't mean to, it just kind of happened. Forgive me, I beg you, I love only you." "Really? It seems to me that it was not love, but only habit and fear of loneliness. Otherwise, how could you so easily cheat on me?" I sat with my eyes downcast, not daring to object. There was some truth in Sandy's words. Our marriage had indeed long ago turned into a routine, lost its spark. Maybe that's why I reached out to Margaret. Bright, passionate, stirring the blood, I wanted to feel alive and desired again. "I'm filing for divorce, Andy," Sandy suddenly said, snapping me out of my thoughts. "I'm sorry, but I can't go on like this anymore. It's too painful. We'd better break up before we completely hate each other." And I realized, this is the end. So simply and routinely, my familiar life, my family was falling apart. But the worst part was that I felt almost no regret. Only some doomed emptiness and bitter relief. That's what we decided. Sandy filed for divorce. I didn't contest it. The division of property, formalities, explanations to friends and acquaintances, all this merged into one hopelessly dull period. And then, the unknown. It would seem that now, when my family life had collapsed, nothing prevented me from being with Margaret. After all, it was her I had been dreaming about all this time, reaching out to her with my whole being. But I still couldn't bring myself to take that step. Our breakup with Sandy was too painful and shameful. I felt like a traitor, a destroyer of the family hearth, unworthy of respect and love. What right did I have, after all this, to count on happiness? And Margaret still didn't get in touch, as if there had never been those ardent confessions, those searing nights, and sweet promises between us. Perhaps for her, it was indeed just a fleeting whim, a way to brighten her loneliness. And I, naive fool, dreamed of more. Weeks passed, but it didn't get any easier. I immersed myself in work, took on any contracts, just so as not to sit in an empty house and torment myself with thoughts. I even started going to the bar nearby, to drown my sorrow in a glass like the last loser. Friends and colleagues looked at me with pity and wariness. They whispered behind my back, shook their heads. No wonder such a scandal. The model family man Andy Brighton left his wife for her own mother. Now my reputation was hopelessly ruined. At first I tried to justify myself, to explain that it was not like that I myself had been led by the nose, seduced and abandoned. But all these pathetic attempts only made the situation worse. And soon I spat and waved it all off. Let them think what they want, I don't care anymore. But it couldn't go on like this forever. I couldn't hide from reality, from myself. And one day, on another sleepless night, I made up my mind. I dialed the painfully familiar number, biting my lip with excitement. One ring, another, and then the dear voice sounded in the receiver. "Andy, is that you?" I swallowed hard. My heart was pounding so hard, it seemed about to jump out of my chest. There was so much I wanted to say, to pour out, to express. But I uttered only one thing. "We need to talk, Margaret. Today, please." We met on the shore of a small lake on the outskirts of town. In this secluded spot, I had once proposed to Sandy. It seems like a lifetime ago. And now, here against the backdrop of the calm water surface and the golden autumn forest, my fate was to be decided. Margaret arrived almost immediately. She got out of the car, fixed her hair. Even from a distance, I could see the excitement running across her face. Suddenly, I had a wild urge to approach her, hug her, inhale the familiar scent of her perfume. But instead, I just shifted awkwardly from foot to foot, waiting for her to come closer. "Hello, Andy," she said, stopping a few steps away. "I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. I didn't know what to say to you after everything." I grinned wryly. Yeah, there was really nothing to say. After all, we had destroyed everything we had. My family, our relationship, even our friendship, everything had gone to dust because of one reckless act. "Sandy filed for divorce," I reported in a colorless voice. "She couldn't forgive our affair, and I don't blame her. In her place, I would have done the same." Margaret closed her eyes as if in pain. A single tear slid down her cheek. "God, what have we done?" she whispered. "My poor girl, how could I do this to my own daughter, destroy her family?" "It's not just your fault," I objected. "We're both good. Two adult idiots who couldn't curb their passion. And what are we supposed to do now?" She raised her eyes to me, in which a whole storm of emotions swirled. Bitterness, remorse, confusion, and at the same time, a timid, desperate hope, so vulnerable and beautiful. My heart ached. "I don't know, Andy. I really don't know. I made an unforgivable mistake, betrayed the person closest to me. But even now, despite everything, I love you. I love you with all my soul. And if you say that it's over between us, I will understand and accept your decision, as long as you're happy." For a few seconds I couldn't say a word, just stared at this amazing woman in amazement. How? How could she retain such selfless love, such nobility, after everything that happened? And I still dared to consider myself unhappy. At that moment, I suddenly realized with stunning clarity, this is it, my happiness. It's standing right in front of me, crying and ready to let me go, just so as not to cause pain. So why the hell am I wasting time on regrets and self-flagellation? I stepped forward and impulsively hugged Margaret, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair. She gasped in surprise, but immediately nestled against me, wrapping her arms around my neck. Tears were streaming down her face, but her lips were smiling, happily and brightly. "I love you too," I whispered, kissing her cheeks, salty from tears. "And I want to be with you no matter what. Yes, we stumbled. Yes, we hurt our loved ones. But we can't spend our whole lives punishing ourselves for it. Maybe we've been given a second chance to fix everything and start over." Margaret hugged me tighter, burying her face in the crook of my neck. Her shoulders were shaking with sobs and laughter at the same time. "Do you really think so? After everything we've done? Oh, Andy, I was so afraid you would hate me, that you would blame me for all the troubles." "Silly," I interrupted, lifting her face by the chin. "I'm the one to blame for everything. I understand that now. I made the decisions and choices myself, and now I'm choosing you, without a shadow of a doubt, because I love you and want to make you the happiest woman in the world. If, of course, you're ready to trust a man who once ruined everything." Margaret laughed through her tears and reached for my lips, and I understood. Yes, damn it, she's ready. We kissed for a long time and blissfully, as if for the first time. The sun was slowly setting over the horizon, painting the clouds scarlet, and we still couldn't tear ourselves away from each other, wanting to prolong this magical moment. I didn't know what lay ahead for us, how Sandy would react to the news of our reunion, whether we would manage to make peace with our daughter and beg for forgiveness, whether Margaret and I would be able to build a normal relationship on the wreckage of our family and reputation. That was all yet to be discovered. But one thing I knew for sure. No matter what happens, my place is next to this woman. Beloved, desired, the only one. And I will never let her go again, even if the whole world is against us. That's the deal, friends. That's my incredible story. A story of forbidden love, big mistakes, and even bigger discoveries. Love, cherish the moment, and never be afraid to listen to your heart. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.